Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sure you all had a good lunch. I certainly had a good lunch. And since this session is the challenging part of the afternoon, I'm going to be expecting that many of you will be standing up and, sharing the platform with us. Okay, let me just start by saying that this entire session is about the digital age. 2-3 years ago, when we started talking about digital disruption, a lot of people look at us and say, is it for real? Are you all serious? And when we talked about, Malaysia growing our digital economy, at that time, the target was 16 or 17%. Everyone looked at it and said, is this for real? But I think today there is no more debate. It is very clear that digital disruption has changed our lives forever. Right? And this topic today is not about digital disruption in the pure sense of the word, but really trying to redefine the impact of digital disruption. Over the last many years, many of us have been talking about the impact of digital disruption to the future of work, the future of our workforce, and of course the future of our workplace. But today, very specifically, we want to talk about the digital disruption to leadership. Okay, so clearly, as I mentioned, the way we bank, the way we shop, the way we communicate to each other, the way we interact with each other has changed over the last few years. And it's sad, but the truth is that when you go to restaurants today, instead of the family members talking to each other, what are they doing? The heads are down and they are playing their device. Right? Now think about that, right? And on top of that, all of us are very familiar with social media. In the past, when we talk about leadership, when I was growing up in my career, I always looked to my boss for acknowledgement. I looked to my boss for the pat on the back. But today, guess what? I don't need that much anymore because I get many likes. Right? So when you post, be honest, right? When you post something, 5 minutes later you check how many people like. Right? And then every half an hour after that, you'll be checking how many likes. See, this whole thing about acknowledgement, acceptance, your self-esteem is influenced by the digital social media. On top of that, in the past, when a young intern or a young employee, when they need to know something, they go to their bosses. And they say, boss, can you share with me your experience? What do you do when you were my age and, when you started your career? But guess what? What do we do now? We go to the website. We go search. We go search about leadership in the digital age. What does it take today to be a leader? Now, all that means that the relationship between leaders or bosses with the members of the organization, that relationship has changed. Add to that, no one will dispute that digital is going to be the center of growth for many organizations. Nobody's going to debate that. Right? So think about that. Today, every chairman, every CEO I meet asks me one question, of course, because I come from a digital background, right? They ask me this question, will blockchain really change the way we work? Are we going to get our ROI? Right? What if we invest and we don't get our ROI? And my question to them is, what if we don't invest? So what's going to happen? So, in addition to social changes, relationship between leaders, bosses, and their employees, businesses itself, if businesses today do not adopt a radical transformation with digital-led strategy, the company may not even exist. Forget about 10 years from now, even 5 years from now. And to add to all of that, there is now this whole thing about data breach. Every day we get data breach. And data breach is a big highlight of media. Every time there's a data breach, big news comes out. And you know what? It impacts the organization's reputation in a very big way. So CEOs today, leaders today, not only are they challenged by being replaced by the social media and by, the search databases, they are also challenged with new approaches to growing their business. Now, and on top of all that, I will add one last thing. AI and automation. AI and automation is replacing jobs. So to add to all of what's happening in the digital world, people are becoming distrustful of their leaders and their organizations because they don't know when they will be replaced. Now, against that backdrop, I'm pleased to introduce my panelists. From on my right, on my left, I got to read because Dato Lee's title is a bit long. Sorry, Dato. So let me just read a little bit. Okay. So Dato Lee Yi Cheong is an academician, Commissioner of UN Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, Honorary Chairman of UNESCO International Science Technology Innovation Center for South-South Cooperation, and many, many other distinguished roles. So Dato Lee. Then we have Shareen, Shariza, Dato Abdul Ghani, is the co-founder and director of Sorga Ventures Sdn Berhad. Some of you may also know her as the former CEO of Talent Corp. So Shareen. And then Dr. Tan Juan Jim, or we call him Jim, is the executive director and head of HR advisory business of Willis Towers Watson, Malaysia. So these are our distinguished panelists. As you can see, they span many generations. And it'll be interesting to hear the perspectives of all of them, because obviously they all have grown up through different eras. And where we are now, the digital era, is by no means the last. We will have many more to come. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw one opening question, and I will ask each of the panelists to give their point of view. So to kickstart, one of the first questions I have really is, how do they see the impact of the digital disruption to the future of leadership? And to put it another way, the leaders that we have today and the criteria of leadership, has it changed over the last few years from their perspective? And what to expect given that now we are in the new era, the digital era? So I'm going to open this question very broadly. Over to Dato first, please, and then you will, go down the line.
Good afternoon. I think it's a very challenging job to be the first speaker after lunch, and the lunch was so good. So I'm going to lighten the atmosphere a bit by saying that the subtitle of my opening remark is The Digital Age and the Rise of Donald Trump. Okay? So I want to set the scene. As you know, we are now in the fourth industrial revolution. So the first one actually was the steam and mechanical power from 1784. The invention of the steam engine by James Watt. Now we are supposed to be in the fourth industrial revolution. And actually, when in Davos 2 years ago, when this was defined, actually it is about that billions of people now on Earth are empowered by the mobile phone and the smartphone and have access to, very good data. But that is coupled to the advances in digital technology, like big data, Internet of Things, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc., 3D printing and all that. So I would actually define that we are in the digital revolution or the digital age. But further, I want to, because I'm what called advocate of South country, developing world, so I want to put it to you that actually what is not the fourth industrial revolution. It's the continuation of the first industrial revolution of the 18th century. And this revolution is driven by consumption of the Western countries that led to colonization, semi-colonization of the rest of the world for resources, and then leading to two destructive world wars. So I want to give it to you is that we are actually still suffering from the first industrial revolution, the continuation of the industrial revolution. Now, the thing about this industrial revolution now, or the digital age, has got two very significant societal concerns. One is wealth disparity. The other one is massive job loss. On wealth disparity, I want to say is that there was a study done by Davos also, and it said that there will be 2 million jobs in the next 5 years created by the digital technology and digital sector. But there will be 7 million job losses in the traditional sectors, resulting in a net job loss of 5 million jobs. Then the just retired World Bank President, Dr. Jim Kim, he said that 2/3 of the jobs in the developing world are at risk due to automation. And he cited 3 countries. One, Ethiopia, 70%, China, 60%, and Thailand, 60% job losses. So I want to put it to you that on the first thing about wealth inequality, now 0.1% of the families in the United States owns the 22% of the wealth, same as 90% of the United States. And just for last week, the Davos last week, Oxfam put up the what called a paper saying that 26 billionaires own as much wealth as 90% of the, half the what called 2.8 billion of half of the world's population. So now, what is the effect of this? The wealth disparity, increasing wealth disparity, and then massive job loss. This is what led to the rise of Donald Trump. That the withdrawal of the Western world into a shell of their own, to America first, Brexit, British Empire first, to hell with the rest of the world. So I want to say that the rise of Donald Trump and like Boris Johnson and all the rest is not only because of the societal condition in the West that say that, myself, the self-interest before societal interest, and to hell with the rest, but also the clever use of all the social media in communication, using digital technology, big data, in influencing elections in the West. Now, fortunately to me, that there is what I call a development revolution led by China and the Asian tigers and Asia Pacific country. And that is said that we actually have to, to invest in infrastructure, build our infrastructure, inclusive infrastructure, as well as nurturing the SMEs ourselves. So now the way forward, we are in the age where we are talking about wanting to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which actually, to me, boil down to solving 2 of the major issues of the world. First, poverty eradication. 2/3 of the world population are still poor. They are in need of the basic necessity of life, which is, in the case what the Chinese say, 衣食住行. Yi means clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. So there is still a big opportunity in infrastructure development, the traditional industries. Now, the other part of the problem is that the world is getting worse because of climate change. And then the West is not giving the money, the rich are not giving the money to solve problems of the environment, of the climate. So I think the solution is that the South, led by China and Malaysia, ASEAN and all that, we have to get together and through South-South cooperation try to actually solve the problem of the world. So for leaders, whether it's in cooperation, of course the top is political leadership, especially in the South, including Malaysia. They must understand what is the background driving the digital age and what is the divide between the rich and the poor, and how we can ourselves make use of digital technology to serve the people, make their life better. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Dato Lee. I think in that short period, Dato Lee has given us so much education. But I must ask Dato Lee to give us, she shared something with us over lunch. So, Dato Lee, that one you must share with us. The thing about the online, Okay. So you must share, this is really interesting.
You see, I'm a commissioner of the Broadband Commission, or United Nations Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. So the Broadband Commission is anchored by 2 UN agencies. One is the International Telecommunication Union, which are actually the agency of the telcos, and the regulators. The other part is UNESCO, and UNESCO, of course, is education, science, and culture. So I'm actually a commissioner nominated by UNESCO, so we are always after content. So in this Broadband Commission, if you Google Broadband Commission, you get a lot of reports. So we have a lot of these working groups trying to actually use broadband and digital technology to help to improve the life of the people. So now we have one group that just being set up, a working group on how to prevent or alleviate online abuse of children. Because online abuse is getting very, very bad for children. So the commissioners in the working group are very old. Now I'm 81, so I'm the oldest. But the average of the commissioner was about 60. And they were talking in the terms of reference about having hotline. And hotline, and then the children can then, if they are under threat, they can phone up the hotline and then get help. So I told them, haven't you all heard about WeChat? What is WeChat? Oh, I said, it's the Chinese. I said, in the WeChat, you have friends nearby. You can see the friends nearby. One friend may be only 100 meters away. Another friend. So I said, why don't you use this technology and then have the children and the youth form vigilante groups of their own? They know who their friends are nearby, and they'll be, at the help of the victims. Oh, is that the case? And I said that, have you heard about artificial intelligence? These are my friends of the 20th century mentality. You see. So, what is about this artificial intelligence? I said, with the advance of the artificial intelligence, any child with a smartphone, they can sense a stranger or friend approaching, whether he or she had evil intention. This is the truth of what is coming. I said, then you don't need to say, just let the children know how to protect themselves with digital technology. And they were shocked. I said, this is coming maybe in 5 years' time. You can actually sense the guy is your friend or whether he's got the evil intention to visit. Then I told them, I said, look, why don't you have members of the working group which are younger? I said that if you have young people, 30 years old and all that, some of them, they may have suffered abuse, but actually have protected themselves against such abuse. And then we can learn from them. They don't have anybody in mind. So they asked me, can you nominate someone, to join the working group? So I jokingly emailed them. I said, my Minister of Youth and Sport is 24-year-old. Can you get him on board? So that is the story.
Thank you very much, Dato Lee. So the interesting part is an online abuse project team thinks that the children should be using a hotline. So that got us all very tickled up, actually, over lunch. So thank you very much, Dato. So 81-year-old and very well-versed of what's happening in the digital world. A round of applause for Dato Lee. Okay, so we're going to go to the lady next, Shareen. So Shareen, what are your thoughts about the future of leadership and what we need to to nurture leaders of the future?
Sure. Thank you. And Dato took us all around the world and we're back in KL. I think we should look at leadership and the digital transformation, in my mind, in three sort of buckets, if I can use that word. Of course, the digital economy and what's happening in terms of how we use tools to work, how we use tools to engage with our talent, and how, as leaders, we use these tools to, get the best out of the people who are around you. The other bit that is really driving the trend is, of course, the sharing economy. So you will see that a lot of people don't really need to really go and own assets. They share, a car, they share various other things. Airbnb is a classic example of how people share their own, home to other people. So the sharing economy is really changing the dynamics of how we operate in the world and how we connect with each other. The third, and I think that's the most important in relation to how it impacts talent, is looking at the on-demand or the gig economy. And I'm very passionate about that topic, as you know, Chanya. And, the gig economy is really looking at individuals with specialized skills, their high-value talent, which doesn't necessarily need to work in an organization in a very traditional fashion. So you still have those kind of opportunities for gig workers to be part of a project in your organization and really tap on their skills and their expertise. And after they finish the 6 months or whatever the duration of that project, they move on to other things. So that's really big in the West. It's coming to our shores. A lot of people are working in that as well. And when we talk about the gig economy with talent, they like it because it gives you the flexibility. You're still very much engaged in the economy, and your skills and your expertise are needed and on demand. But you choose the kind of work that you do, and you enjoy doing it, right? So that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But when we talk to companies and they say, why would they want to have gig workers? They have to understand that the current way of work with the devices that's with us, you really don't need to have your talent to be with you 9 to 5 at your workstation. You work from anywhere, everywhere, and you're still very productive and you still contribute. And for companies, it's also a cost-efficient angle for them because you don't really need to have that talent in your organization full-time, but you certainly need them for that specific project. And how do you then engage with this kind of talent? Companies need to look at their talent profile and their talent mix in a very different way, because with millennials and pseudo-millennial next to me, they work differently. And if you don't engage with them in different ways and looking at tools and policies that is more progressive and digitally driven, you're going to lose your talent. And it's borderless now. People will just walk out of your organization. So companies and leaders need to think about how you innovate the way you look at your talent profile. Yeah, of course, in some sectors you need the full-time workers because they need to run the operations and things like that. But there will be a significant number of people who are going to be your gig workers, your contingent workers, and they're highly skilled and high-value talent. So how do you mix that into your organization? That's an interesting discussion that we're going to have. That's where I'm coming from.
So I'm going to ask Shareen a provocative question. So today the topic's on leadership. So are we talking about leaders with no organizations in the future?
Yeah, because individuals are their own leaders and they choose to do the things that they do, right? So there's no more the hierarchical, I'm at the top and the rest of you are there. Somewhere in the organization. If you're going to think about it in that way, then you're going to really be, archaic in your approach to how you leverage on people around you, whether they're in your organization or outside of your organization. And the leadership becomes the individual, right? So it's no more hierarchical organization. It's very network. People collaborate. And there's no structure in that sense. We have to think of it in that way. That's where it's moving.
I think that, we can only look at the billionaires. Did Jack Ma have an organization? No. Did Jeff Bezos of this Amazon had an organization? No. It was just 2 or 3 people getting together, having a brilliant idea, and then through the use of the digital technology, then build themselves up. That's why I think big organizations actually are the dinosaurs now.
Okay, I'm not going to comment on that. Okay, because we have someone from a relatively large organization sitting beside us. So we'll ask Jim to give us his views on leadership of the future.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Chanyo. We also were discussing just now during lunch that the definition of the millennials. And I think our conclusion is that we're all millennials at heart, right? So I want to just touch a little bit on what my other distinguished speakers here have shared. And just to add on some of the points that they mentioned, but something probably closer to home where we deal with organization and people. So I asked the question, I said that whilst this topic is about digital leadership and where is it headed, but do we actually all in this room know what is digital leadership, right? And more importantly, why is it important that in the Industrial Revolution 4.0, that as we march toward this direction, that we're going to be faced with the kind of challenges and even the kind of sufferings that Dato Lee was just mentioning from the first Industrial Revolution. So if you just take a step back and look at our economy today, right, it is so possible that any economy could be very susceptible to disruption. And the big can fall. So in the example of what Dato Lee shared about the Amazon story, about Jack Ma, the big can truly fall, right? So the big question here is that without even knowing what we're doing, I'm sure all of us have a play in even buying stuff online, for example, on Lazada, on you buying Netflix and all those things, right? Effectively, if everyone in the country actually contributes a certain dollar to this, there's actually a huge outflow of money out of the country. And that can potentially constrict our balance sheet. And the big question to this is that where is the governance? Does this sort of economy actually create local jobs, local opportunities for people back in Malaysia, right? So it definitely has come to a point whereby that we cannot avoid and actually accept the fact that moving inside the digital economy is going to be something that all of us are going to go in with our eyes wide open, and more importantly, being able to navigate through all the challenges that is right in front of us. So when we look back at companies, and this is some of the research that we do, we find that even in companies today, more than 50% of companies doesn't have any digital KPIs. So are we really headed towards a digital economy? Are we headed towards digital leadership? Most these companies that I've seen are still falling back on our, rather what I call outdated or old school balanced scorecards, right? Who doesn't look at anything or anything closely related to digital KPIs. So the question here that I have is that what is this paradigm shift that we're trying to achieve, right? And I'm just quoting some of the things that I heard from the earlier sessions in the morning from YBT and Chua, that we need to be solution-driven, right? And the three things that I think that we need to really look at is what value are we going to bring to the table, and what is the purpose? What are we doing this for? And finally, where's the destination, right? So some of the myths that I see organizations today are asking, especially in the eye of the digital economy, is that is the digitalization of things really about reducing costs, reducing errors, or is it about augmenting productivity, right? So what does augmenting productivity means? So if you look at traditionally, if you just go to a bank, right, and we all know this, right, the traditional person that is right in front of you at the cashier, his role is about processing and producing requests from customers who walk in and dealing with them. But if you just look deeper at what that role does, 70% of that role's competency translate to more technical skills, whereby 30% translate to customer experience or customer related or soft skills, I call it. But if we are really thinking about reinventing jobs and making machines take over the role of the cashier, so the big question is that where will these people be displaced? And I think that is one of the big questions that people are asking as well. So do organizations continue to look at it from a cost-effective process efficiency perspective, or is it about augmenting productivity? And the augmenting of productivity is really looking at what's the higher order of services that we're providing. Is it now translating 70% of your technical skills into more customer-oriented and then 30% technical and bringing that customer experience to a different level? And hence asking the question about upskilling, right? So that translates to the second sort of like myth that I want to talk about, is that is this sort of things in terms of digital change and transformation exclusive to the IT department alone? I think a lot of organizations, when they look at digital change, they start it off from the IT department. But in reality, and this was a recent study that was done by IDC, that they were just showing the comparison of IT budgets that are being utilized in a company. Where does the IT budget come from? Is it from the line of business, or is it from the CIO? CIO being the Chief Information Officer. And interestingly, in the West, it is about 40% by the CEO, 60% by the line of business. And when you come all the way to the east side of the world, you find that that number suddenly switched to 80% CIO, 20% lines of business. So you can clearly see that the trend of where this focus is and making digital a part of everybody's business is still far from where we see in terms of the markets going, right? So that's the other myth that I wanted to touch on, which is whether is this exclusive to IT or is this part of the lines of business, right? And the other last myth that I want to sort of just quickly touch on before I pass it off to Ms. Chong is that the question on the negative impact on workers, right? And whether we'll basically, to what Shareen's point about using contingent workers, which is what we call the gig economy, is going to basically be able to, will affect businesses. So some very practical questions that come from there is that, what about job security? What about the trust and the dedication of contingent workers to the company? So recently we did a survey on that across Asia Pacific, and about 500 over companies have participated, and at least about 20% of that 500 was done out of Malaysia. And what was interesting from that was that most of the leaders and the experience of the leaders using contingent workers they felt actually the same, that there's people, whether they are full-time employees or they are actually contingent workers, were similarly as dedicated to the organization's cause as they were as full-time, right? So the displacement of jobs, the job security, as well as the trust you can have in terms of the contingent workforce and where the gig economy is moving is actually rather positive in my view. Right.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Jim, nicely covered almost every topic that I actually had in mind. So he has read my brief. But I think there are a couple of key points that Jim has made, and I'll ask for comments from the rest. I think one of the first things that, if you remember when I started, I talked about trust. In the past, in many, many years ago, when I first joined IBM, and in fact, for many of the people who have worked more than 20 years, job security is very important. So we join a company that we think we're going to grow old with. But the truth is that it's not just that the company has changed, but also the mindset of the people have changed. Data shows that 50% of the global workforce today are below 30 years old. And by 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials. Is how they think the same as how my generation think, or Dato Lee's generation thing, I mean, I'm not going to comment about this too. But the point is that when we started working, we always thought that we will work for a company for life, which I did, by the way. I retired from IBM after 30 years. So I grew in that generation. But, it's kind of a two-way thing. The mindset of the employees as well as the mindset of the employers. Now, that's kind of like, coming to the point about the gig economy, where is that real? Is that going to be something that will be the future of talent? And I think one important, so that is, I'm going to put that aside for now, we'll talk about that a bit later, but what is important that I want to bring up now is that this discussion really about leaders. So we are going back to this question about leaders. So as we spoke just now, clearly, because the organization has changed, the mindset of the employers, meaning the company, has changed, the mindset of the employees have changed. What is going to drive this whole change that will make leaders effective for the future? So all this change happening, there's no debate about it. But how can we make leaders effective for the future? Right? And we talk about talent strategy. Who owns talent strategy? Is it HR department? Who owns IT, digital strategy? Is it the CIO? Now, clearly, what is coming up is we are expecting leaders of the organization to own all this strategy. So I'm going to open back to the floor. I think Shareen has something to say before I get Dato to say.
Sorry, just the point on the gig economy, and thank you, Jim. Sorry. The bit that we were talking about in terms of the trend, and I should share a little bit in terms of the study. If you look at the next 5 years or so, companies are already thinking about 40% of their workforce coming from contingent workers. And if you look at the profile of the kind of talent that's in the gig economy, no surprises, 63% are millennials, 59% are Gen X, and, baby boomers at 44%. So it cuts across different generational talent, if I can say that word, and really different people look for different types of work that they do, and technology is giving them the enablers and the tools to work in very different ways. So when you ask the question of leaders, who owns the IT strategy, who owns the talent strategy, I'm going to flip it around to say that actually everyone in the organization owns the IT strategy and the talent strategy, because you never know where the ideas are going to come from. It's not just centered at the top of the pyramid. The pyramid doesn't exist now. It is a network and very flat, collaborative environment, and your ideas can come from the young one in some department that you've not engaged with, but that person could come up with the idea that is going to change your whole organization. So how do we look at leaders at the top now becoming a leader, a network leader that encourages collaboration, and really lose that kind of mental model to say that I know all the answers, because that generation or that way of working is no more. So we need to rethink how we engage people in our organization and how we perform tasks and engage with them so that our company thrive and moves forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the point that when you look at making effective leaders and marrying from what Shareen shared, reflect back at what we are doing today in organizations, reflect back at the skills, and why I always fall back down to the individual or to the job level is because it all starts from there. That's the lowest denominator that you'll find in any organization, right? And when you think for a second that entering the Industrial Revolution 4.0 is a millennial story. It is a young person's job because he understands digital. He knows how to program codes. He knows how to look at digital marketing. He knows how to use his mobile phone better than the older guy, right? Then you're completely mistaken by that. That's because that in the Industrial Revolution 4.0 or the 4.0 environment, digital skills is a basic requirement. It's the same as writing, reading, numeracy skills. That is a basic requirement. So that comes back to the point about upskilling and what and how leaders today are looking at the problem from a talent development perspective. Do we hire or do we train?
So I think that's a very interesting question, because this is really about paradigm shift. How we hire, how we promote will determine the kind of leaders that we're going to get. Right? So this is the whole paradigm shift that's happening today. Right? In the past, you promote the best salesperson to be the sales manager. Is that the same paradigm that we're going to use today? Right? Do we homegrown or do we hire from outside? So this is an interesting question, and let's hold that thought for now. Maybe I ask Dato to give his point of view.
Actually, I would like to go back to the question, whether you stay with the company for life or not. I think that depends on the company. Like, I think IBM, it went from what they call accounting computer company, then it invented the PC, but now from supercomputer, big computer system, it went to the cloud. So if you are nimble, although you are a big elephant, but you can dance, I think it's no harm in staying on with the same company, because this company is all the time keeping up to change and the leader of the digital age. But on the other side of the story, I want to quote the case of Huawei. You know Huawei, which is under attack throughout the world now. They are an employee share ownership company. Every employee, Chinese of course, I mean like the Malaysian employee of Huawei Malaysia, they do not own share. But if you are Chinese citizen, you own share. And then, of course, the employees are all very talented young people. And at about 35 years of age, when they have been with the company 10 years, the company asked them to leave. The company asked them to leave, but to actually ask them to set up company, start-up of their own specialty, with Huawei actually investing in their startup. So what Huawei is trying to do is build up an ecosystem of companies which are related to them, but owned by their former employees. And they are trying to spread this philosophy to the rest of the world. So I think that the companies like IBM are getting fewer and fewer in this digital age. But companies like Huawei want to spin off, small startups and all that, so that they are surrounded by, companies which are their friends, will be a trend of the future.
Yeah, that really is very interesting. Now, I actually want to open the floor for questions, but before I do that, let me just make one last point, just to wrap up the discussion. We're going to talk some more, but just to wrap up for now, is that what is appearing now is the entire structure of a monolithic company and leadership at the top appears to be going away from what we are hearing. What we are hearing now is that leadership appears to be dispersing, going to where the center of knowledge, capability is, regardless of where the person is in the organization. And even companies like Huawei are actually encouraging the spinning out of smaller companies and with their own leaders. Now, against that backdrop, I would like to open the floor for questions. If I may, where's the MC? Yeah. Could we have some questions from the floor?
Yes, sure. So open for questions. Can you proceed to the mic and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm quite impressed with Dr. Lee. You are in the pre-war, I'm in the post-war babies. But we are still in the digital age, and I'm glad I'm still able to receive some of the concepts. Okay, for leadership, I think that we have to realize the millennials as an employer. They are mobile, they like to travel, they don't mind settling anywhere. And the second thing is that education. I don't know, is it, like you say, do we deal with it as an education or is it skills on demand? Where do we focus on? The third thing I noticed is also this, that AI is in the picture, no doubt, but unless we have the wisdom to curate, how to apply is very confusing. I think monolithic organization still has that latent wisdom inherent. It's how to curate that into an AI system. Who is doing that? I don't know. On the employer front, we have to believe we are, no matter what we do in a local environment, we are globally competitive. There's no such thing now in today's world whereby you say, okay, we are localized. With the digital marketing, digital online sign-up, you are in a global environment or competitive environment. So the other way, when we talk to Lee Kai-fu, the inherent of AI, he always says, is it STEM, non-STEM, empathy, or skills? So there are a lot of questions we don't know, but it is exciting.
Sorry, I didn't get your name.
Lee Oikam. Yeah.
Okay. So, who would you like the question to be addressed to? Okay, any comments from the panelists?
Well, for me, it's skills. Because if you look at the trend now, people are not going to universities for academic degrees. You will see that, slowly having a different balance. People are going for short-term skills, and they do transferable type skills, education. That's the trend now. And, it doesn't really matter what academic qualifications that you have when you start with. It's how you are able to actually present your ideas and execute and things like that. So I would go for skills and experience. Yeah, fine. Jim?
Okay.
You have to disagree with me.
Yeah, I mean, skills experience is one area that, of course, sometimes it can be measured as hard. And I want to just take also the point about what Ms. Lee mentioned about the old monolithic model where how do you curate or apply wisdom, right, where there is still latent wisdom in an organization. But I think just sort of like a bit of back to differ that if you look at the number of startups and businesses that is created, they didn't have any large structures of sorts. There was no latent wisdom that actually made them more successful, right? I mean, except for there were some examples of cultural impacts, like places in Japan, why there are less startups is because of the nature of work there, that people are very loyal to organization. But if you talk about, I think, the skills of the future, it will definitely be less technical or more less specific, whereby it can be really done by machine. But what is going to be really interesting that I think is going to be different is something called curiosity, right? So the skill on curiosity, being able to have that potential to look for new things, very, very pioneering, is what I think machines cannot replace us with, right? And the other thing as well is what I call diversity, because if you look at the world that we're working in today, we are going to be getting information from different people, different countries, different culture, different ideas. And if we are going to be fairly monotonous in that sense, then we'll never be able to embrace the diversity of things to drive inclusiveness, to drive sustainability. But I think the third most important thing here is what I also heard from the recent Davos meeting, and this was said by Ginny Romarty, right, from IBM, about trust deficit. And I think that the whole thing about integrity as we go into the new world is going to be critical in that nature, right? So I leave these three things from curiosity, diversity, and integrity as my takeaway points for this.
I mentioned about the World Bank president, Jim Kim, who said 2/3 of the jobs in the developing world will be lost through automation. His solution is education. Education, education, and education. So, but to me, I think the education has to change in keeping with the digital age. That means, you see, the digital age is advancing. Still for the last 30 over years in line with Moore's law. That means every 2 years is a new generation, a step up. So how to keep yourself in step with the changing technology, which is impacting on every facet of the life of society, that is a big challenge of education in the future. So for those of us who are very much concerned with education of the children in the digital age, like myself, I've been in the Inter-Academy Partnership, which is the umbrella body of the World Academy of Sciences. We have a science education program to say that we train the children now to look for knowledge, not to by book learning and rote learning. So because they are much more adept in using smartphones, search engine, whatever. So what we need to do in our education system from primary school onwards is, as you say, arouse their curiosity, their creativity, so that they know what they want to do, not to actually fill their head with all the book learning and rote learning imposed by teachers of the 20th century. So I want to emphasize that our education system and if our colleges and universities should actually now set up colleges for lifelong learning. Every 18 months, every technique, what called digital technology worker, they must go back to school to upgrade themselves. But this thirst for knowledge, for upgrade, for curiosity, it must be nurtured from the young.
Yeah, thank you, Dato. Okay, so I see some questions coming up. Can you give me your name and give us your name and also where you are from?
Hi, my name is Radhika. I'm representing the Monash Malaysia Business Alumni Chapter. So firstly, thank you for the very informative session. I think all the three panel speakers did a fantastic job, as well as Chye being the moderator. I have 3 questions. The first is, in the digital age, do you foresee the fundamental characteristics of a leader changing? If yes, how? My second question is, how will the digital age impact our efforts to increase women in leadership? And my final question, which ties back to Dato's point earlier, is how should the trends that we're seeing now be reflected in our education system? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So 3 questions. First question, the fundamental characteristics of leadership, has that changed in the digital age? So anyone wants to take this first?
To me, a leader, whether it's of the nation or whether it's a corporation or just NGO, whatever, he or she should be ethical and moral. So whatever age, digital age, post-digital age, pre-digital age, if you are not a moral person, if you are only for your own self-interest and not caring for society and the poor and the weak, you are not fit to be a leader.
Okay, thank you very much. I think so just to summarize what Dato said is that there are some fundamentals, characteristics of leaders that has not changed no matter what age. Now I'm going to add a little bit to that and say that is fundamental. So you must have that to be a leader. However, the digital age brings about different kinds of competencies that needs to be acquired. So for example, and this by the way ties to your question on trends, if a CEO today is not aware of the digital disruption that's happening around him or her, and if he or she is not able to adopt some of these disruption technologies to bring about growth as well as to prevent risk to the organization, then the leader will not be successful either. So there's a fundamental characteristics, plus on top of that, you need additional skills as you go into the digital age. Then we talked about now the disbursement of leadership, right? So maybe to that point, I will probably ask one of the other speakers to comment a little bit about disbursement of leadership as to how does that affect the role of the leader now that leadership is dispersed. right? It is no longer like a person. How does that affect what is expected of a leader, the characteristics of a leader? I mean, if any one of you would like to take that.
That's a tough question to answer. Okay, let me try, and maybe I can ask people from the floor to help as well if they think differently. I think 3 things that I pick up from my years of experience in consulting and advisory, dealing with organization and people. And in this change in the economy, I think firstly is how we evaluate performance, right? From back in the days where it is very structured, yearly, year in, year out, you do have a performance appraisal and all that, towards something that's what I call agile teams. People work in different projects, different managers of sorts, different timing, different time zones, etc. So the way that we are going to be changing how we measure people will have to take shape tremendously to make this a reality, right? The second thing here is about leadership development, and I think I touched this a little bit on my earlier point. How we create curiosity, diversity, and more importantly, trust and integrity. In leadership development, and I touched on your earlier question about what has changed in leadership. I don't think anything has changed in the qualities of a leader. To me, if I take the analogy of a human body where you have all your different muscle groups, you will still have all those things as part of your entire body, right? But the question is which muscle group is more intensified at that time. So, given the situation that where we are now, there are certain muscle groups or certain skills that you need to put more emphasis on to have that advantage during the digital age, right? So, those are that's the second one. And then the third one here is that, which is linking more to how organization structures and policies are going to affect the way that we're going to bring about new ideas, new leadership in an environment. It's no longer going to be the usual structure of hierarchy anymore. I think very commonly we also see organizations that the guy on top must be a much senior guy, must be an older guy. Otherwise, if he's not an older guy, means he won't gain the respect, right? And traditionally so as well, sometimes the guy on the top is also the same guy who has the loudest voice, right? And I call that sometimes there's this, if you Google it on the internet, there's this standard org structure that shows you that the guy on top is sometimes what I call a chief idea killer, not the chief executive officer, right? So again, I think if you look at where we're headed, and to answer Chinese question, this would be the 3 areas that I would see significant changes and trends with regards to the digital age.
Maybe if I can add a little bit.
Okay, you can add, but you're going to answer the question on women.
Okay. I think we're being a bit hard on the leaders today. They play a very important role. But we talk about the future and how attributes of a leader needs to change. So we think about these things, we talk about the 21st century skills and attributes. You got to be agile, you got to be collaborative, you got to be innovative, creative and all that. So if we put our leaders to account, can we say that they are all those attributes? So sometimes we demand that of the people who are around us, but as leaders we lose sight of doing that. And it's not easy to do. I've led an organization. I try to be collaborative and all that. It's tough. But I think we need to actually just do it because that's the way people work these days. So we have to think about how we operate in our organization amongst our colleagues. I know of leaders who don't even have a room. They have a workstation right next to whoever in that floor. So, and I've been to his office and I see it. So how do we then break those kind of barriers so that then the organization is a completely different place for people to work, to engage, to enjoy the work that they do, and they stay? Because then you create that kind of environment that is very supportive of everybody's skills and expertise, no matter what age, what gender, what ethnicity, or inclination they have.
Okay, the woman one. So Radhika, very good questions. But can I just park the woman one aside a bit? Because I can see two gentlemen behind you. Okay, so I'm going to park the question about women a bit later. So if a chance, we will try to address that. So we have about, I think, 10 minutes to go. So yes, your question, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Timothy Chan from the Association of Malaysian Economics Undergraduate. So this question will be posited to all members of the panel. So this is so we have seen how the digital economy, specifically big data, can be misused into manipulating people, right? So it's not just the scandal of Cambridge Analytica, and also the fact that there's a lot of cybersecurity issues. So the question is, how can we regulate the digital economy? Okay, that's the first one. Second is a philosophical question, which is, so you talk about education being geared towards the digital economy. You talk about all this emphasis on digital economy. So at the end of the day, is the digital economy an end to itself or a means to an end? And to what end? So these are my questions.
Yeah, maybe we get.
You have been sending a long time.
Yeah, so we get all the questions together. So so first question on regulation, Philip, right? And then second question was on the. Yeah, is it an end by itself or okay? So it means an end, all right? And then okay, so let's get another question first before we continue.
Hi, my name is Anik from the Association of Malaysian Economics Undergraduates, and my question is, firms these days are demanding more of leadership in their employment. So my question is, how do you realize and identify the human capital of leadership amongst the millennial generation? That's my question.
Leadership amongst the millennials.
Okay. So
leadership amongst the millennials, you're saying.
Yeah, and
how do you...
the Gen Y and the Gen Z. How do you realize that and identify them?
Okay. How do you realize that? Yeah. How do you unlock the leadership?
How do you unlock? Anik, you mean how do you unlock the leadership among the millennials?
How do you find out? How do you discern? How do you pick out from the group?
How do you identify the leadership capabilities?
How do you discern from the group of millennials?
Okay.
And
so how do you identify leaders among the group of millennials? You're saying.
Typically, it's not the loudest one in the group. From my experience, it's probably the quiet one who is very experienced and have deep thoughts.
Digital. Okay, so we have three questions. So the first one is on how do you regulate the digital economy. The second one is this a means to an end or an end itself? And the third one is how do you identify leaders among the millennials? Okay, so let me just kind of open it, and if anyone feels passionate about any of those questions.
The digital economy, whether it's a means to an end or an end itself, it's a means to an end. People are talking about Industrial Revolution 5.0 and societal sort of response to automation and all that. And if you look at Japan, they're already preparing for 5.0. So we are moving forward. Digital is a means that takes us there, but it's not an end to itself. That's not.
Yeah, and I think what Jim also said earlier on when you talk about what is it that you're trying to achieve. Right? So importantly is why do we even care about digital disruption? It is really what it can bring to us, right, to the society. And as what Dato also mentioned, imagine being able to identify, using AI to identify risks to our children. So I think really, clearly, it's a means to an end rather than itself. Dato, you want to comment?
I would like to point out the example of Thailand. Thailand, actually, 2 years ago, I think it's the first country. They set up a Ministry of Digital Economy and Society. I think that this is very significant. That means it is not about just driving economy, the Ministry of Digital Economy, but it's Ministry of Digital Economy and Society. That means how does the digital economy affect the Thai society? Now, why was this ministry set up? The Prime Minister visited Huawei in Shenzhen, and then was very impressed with all the digital technology. And then he posed a question to Huawei. He said, how does that affect the common people, all your technology? So Huawei and Roland Berger, the very famous consulting firm from Europe, they did a roadmap for Thailand, digital roadmap. And they identified 4 main topics. The first one, e-government. how to make the government procedures, application of forms and all that easier for the common people, e-government. The second one, e-agriculture, how to increase rice productivity for the farmer. The third one, tourism. As you know, tourism is a big industry, and a lot of Thai people are involved in jobs in the tourism. And the fourth one is aging, how to look after the aged. So then this ministry was set up to link the drive for what they call economic and societal uplift through digital economy. How does it relate to benefit the people? So when you talk about legislation of the digital economy age, you must be careful, because as we say, if you try to control and legislate, you kill the curiosity, you kill the creativity. So there must be a balance. That means what you need to do is to find out what aspect of the digital economy or age benefit people, and try to use legislation or whatever to actually facilitate those. And those which, like for example, the online abuse and all that, of course, you have to have some legislation to actually suppress that. So I think the legislative question with respect to the digital age is not one size fits all. It must be, horses for courses.
So I think that's a very important point, Dato, that you brought up, because digital is not an industry by itself, right? Digital is being applied to industries, being applied to various government initiatives. So digital is really a means to an end, and I think the regulation will be related not so much to digital itself, but regulation in the industry, right? So okay, so let me just try and get Jim to talk about to answer the question of the millennial. Okay, how do you identify leaders from among millennials?
Well, if you need to identify leaders from millennials, then they are probably not leaders. That's my view, right? So a real leader will stand out without you having to identify, coming up with a set of criteria to do a sort of checkbox assessment, etc., etc. Yeah. If he's good, he's good, right? You'll see it from a mile away.
Can I add a little bit on that? Because I think companies miss out a big chunk of potential when it comes to their talent, is that they don't profile their talent well enough. We profile our customers. We know them inside out. We know them what they buy and what they do. But you don't profile your talent. So when you don't profile your talent, you can't identify the leaders. So we have to get very smart in how we engage with our talent and profile them. And the leadership qualities and attributes will surface. The ones with potential, you also know, and you know how to guide them so that will surface as well. So profiling is very, very key in organizations, and we don't do enough of that.
However, the other thing that I would like to add, whilst I wouldn't recommend you go and identify these people, is instead to create the right environment for it. So, just coming back down to at the organization level, many a times if you look at the policies of an organization, they restrict people from actually owning the ideas. So any thing that you create out of the organization, actually the IP belongs to the organization. So I find that some of these policies may be too archaic to generate ideas in an organization, to bring out the best in people, right? And there are also organizations that I've seen who has created ideation programs that allows them to come up with startup areas that they can go out and be sponsored by the organization, and in fact the organization invests into the ideas that they have, assuming that it's a good idea. So I feel that our HR policies and organization policies are a little too archaic in many organizations, and if that change, it would be a strong booster or support towards being able to create leaders.
And the tragedy for our companies is that we recruit people to fill boxes. People don't fill boxes. So you have a box and say, okay, I want to recruit this person to fit that box. That's not the way organizations work. we are a microcosm of different things. So you don't recruit people to fill a box. But that's how our HR policies and how we recruit our talent in our companies today. Let's be real about that. It's not about the boxes. It's about the talent, what they can do. How do you profile them so that their skills and their expertise are well, set up for the task that you have for them?
Thank you very much, all of our panelists here. We have come to the end of the session, and what I'd like to do is just summarize just a little bit what we have discussed over the last, I think, an hour or so. So clearly, leadership has changed in shape and form, but not in spirit, from what it was many, many years ago. Clearly, a lot of paradigms, especially HR paradigms and HR practices, need to be relooked at as we start to build leaders of the future. In fact, we should already build leaders of the future, not just starting now. Clearly, the gig economy is something to think about. Where is the source of talent for tomorrow? And there's this thought about leadership now no longer being the head of a monolithic organization, but rather dispersed to where the talent, to where the need is, to where the knowledge is, to where the authority is, to where the talent is. So with that, I would like to end our session and thank all my distinguished panelists with a round of applause and pass the floor back to the organizers. And thank you for the questions from the floor. Really appreciate that.